Hey, it's Sonia, and welcome to the SMARTA Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to a new episode here on the SMARTA Podcast. I'm Sonia Marta, and I cannot wait to dive into today's episode full of optimism, reality, and reflecting on who you are right now, and if it's working, if it's not, with the number one relationship expert, Case Kenny. He is a phenomenal, impactful person that's inspiring the new generation today, all in terms of relationship, mindfulness, and with his new book, That's Bold of You, it just brings everything to the next level, mixing real life experiences with scientific research. And I'm just gonna go ahead and read you the blurb, just because I think it's such a powerful explanation of why you need to get your hands on this book, especially if you're coming from bad relationships, or you need to learn to choose yourself, or you just need to become better at what you do. So, if you've been ever called too much or told to be more realistic, That's Bold of You is a call to unlearn the labels that society has put on you. If you're too difficult, if you say you're an anxious person, intimidating, crazy, too loud, or too quiet, embrace being your own version of too much. And this whole book relies around the theme of embracing your truest, wildest self and enjoying it. It's time to say goodbye to sorry and pressure to conform and reclaim your power. And now what I love most about this book, which I'm gonna center towards today's conversation with the amazing Case Kenny, I just wanna go ahead and read you what bold as an adjective means here on the first page right before beginning his content of the book. Bold as an adjective is fearless in embracing your honesty, refusing to allow society's label to define your worth, empowered by imperfection, simplicity, and forgiveness. To be bold is to recognize that you have work to do, but you're still worthy of love, fulfillment, and rewarding experiences. To be bold is to find peace in being lost in the right direction. To be bold is to dismiss the labels society wants you to define yourself by. And finally, to be bold is to decide that you're exactly who you're supposed to be. I mean, isn't that amazing? So let me go ahead and introduce Case Kenny, because I cannot wait for you to get a chance to listen to this amazing and life-changing episode. All right. Case Kenny is on a mission to help people live more optimistic, mindful, and authentic lives. Since 2014, he has been writing, speaking, and teaching practical ways to cultivate self-awareness, build confidence, and quiet the overthinking mind. His podcast, New Mindset Who Dis, has resonated with millions of listeners, and his viral writing on Instagram reaches hundreds of millions more. Known for blending uplifting life truths with research-backed perspective, Case simplifies mindfulness in ways that feel relatable, refreshing, and most importantly, hopeful. Through his signature red pen writing on social media, his upcoming book, The Opposite of Settling, and his debut book, That's Bold of You, he encourages people to challenge their self-doubt through actionable mindful practices. He regularly leads workshops around the world, reminding people that no matter where they are in life, they have the power to rewrite their story and trust that the best is yet to come. Case Kenny, welcome on the SMARTA Podcast. It's an absolute delight to have you on here. Okay, so your journey has taken you from launching your podcast, New Mindset Who Dis, that's already a top 25 show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and it's taken you to collaborating with global artists like Griffin and Sam Felt, building a viral mindfulness brand that's especially resonating with millions on social media. Could you go ahead and talk directly with a person listening right now? And from all your expertise as a relationship expert, a writer, a podcaster, and the creator of mindfulness journals, from everything that you're about to share in today's episode, what are your top 3 key takeaways?
I sure can. Thanks for having me. I've been doing this for quite some time. So I mean, like podcasts I've been doing for 7 years. I've been writing since 2014. So it is very much a gift to be able to look back at all the things I've talked about and spoken about. And, you know, it's a humbling thing too, because the more you grow, the more you change your mind about things. And that's the gift of life. So I think one of the things I certainly would say would be, it is the purpose of your life is to change your mind from time to time. Like, I've never been a huge fan of people the idea of just be yourself. I'm all in on just be your realest, most authentic self, but allow that to change. So I'd say first and foremost, allow yourself to change, allow your opinion to change, allow your ambitions to change, allow your preferences for partners and friends to change. Who you are at 24 is not who you'll be at 30 and 35 and 40 and so on and so forth. And it is such a gift to be able to move within that I think sometimes we become so fixed in identities. Oh, well, this is who I was in college, therefore that's who I am. Like, no, like allow yourself to change, because I've changed and reinvented myself over and over and over again. And I think that's such a gift. Another thing, I mean, I think all of my work really is around optimism. The whole point of my journey was to know myself so that I could be more hopeful and optimistic, so that when I felt a certain way, I didn't prescribe permanence to it, right? I think that's the trap we all fall into. We feel a certain way, well, that's who I am and that's my identity, and any hope goes out the window. So I've really come to define optimism as the belief that things can change. So maybe that's number 2, right? Give yourself the freedom to sit in a feeling or a heavy period of life and acknowledge it and honor the feeling. Whatever you do, in whatever mindful habit you could bring this to life with, tell yourself that things can change. They can change for the better. And you know, I could talk for hours on how we actually make that a reality with the way we speak to ourselves. The only way to actually be optimistic is to change your emotional vocabulary, your relationship with life, right? When something happens to you, where are you within the spectrum of that? That all comes down to word choice. But at the end of the day, it requires you to believe that things can change. You could be in a sad period of life, a lonely period of life. It could be month after month after month. The belief that things can change eventually will give you a reality where things can have changed. So that's number 2. Number 3, I mean, I've learned that, you know, there's many feelings that we have in life, namely anxious feelings or sad feelings or misunderstood feelings or lonely feelings. Like, we can go down the list of negative feelings. When we encounter those feelings, we have to ask ourselves a question. So often when we feel anxious, for instance, or we feel like we're running behind, or we feel like we're messing up, we interpret those as resistance, right? Those are resistant feelings. We interpret any sign of resistance as wrong, right? I feel anxious, therefore I'm doing something wrong. I feel lonely, therefore I'm doing something wrong. I feel like I'm falling behind, therefore I'm doing something wrong. And sometimes, yes, that is your intuition saying, hey, this is the wrong scenario for you. But I've found that a lot of times when you encounter resistance, you're not being punished for being wrong. It is the price that you need to pay to be right. I did a whole episode on this recently, on the difference between price and punishment. Like, we think we're being punished, right? If I feel a negative way, it's a red flag. It's wrong. It's a mistake. Maybe it's not, and it's a sign that you're paying the price for the thing that you said you wanted. Like, you feel anxious because you've got a lot on your plate, because you've got a lot of ambition in your heart, and you feel driven towards that thing, and therefore you feel a little anxious kind of way. But that is the price that you're paying for the thing that you want. So it's the idea of don't curse the climb when you said you wanted a view, which is right over the top, and the climb sucks, and the climb is anxious and makes you feel unlovable and lost and all these negative feelings, but you're paying the price. Paying the price means you're right on the cusp of having the thing that you want. It's right on the other side. So if anything, it's like, see that feeling as a sign that you are getting closer, not further from the thing that you want. And obviously there's nuance in there. We're not just accepting any negative feeling and, you know, sitting in it forever. But I think that's really, really helpful, because we are wired as humans to look for wrongness, right? We are wired to say, oh, wrong, therefore no. Wrong, therefore no. But so often we mislabel these things. Resistance isn't always a no. Resistance could very much so, in my experience, be a yes. Like, this is it. Like, you are at the store, you have found the thing that you want, you are checking out, you're putting your credit card down, and all you have to do now is just pay, and it'll be yours in a minute. And I think that mentality has really helped me in relation to feelings. Seeing it as a price, not as a punishment, seeing resistance as guidance, not as a red flag, I think would really help people, because, you know, that's fancy poetic language, but really it's the power of pause, and it's the power of not labeling something immediately. So yeah, I would say those 3 things, I think most recently, looking back at all the things that I've talked about over the years, I think have been really helpful for me, and maybe helpful to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say that I love your answer to that, because you gave me so many different perspectives on a lot of issues that today's society is actually struggling with. A lot of people already are way too common with the imposter syndrome. You talked about reinventing yourself. And there was this one podcast that I looked at where you interviewed Lewis Hose on the challenge of acceptance. As you were talking about healing that has a lot of connotations, you said that there's this quote in your book which really ties in with how we can build ourselves up better and view actually those little challenges or negative paths in your life that build your resilience. And you said it's so much easier for us to identify our not enoughness than it is to identify our enoughness. And with that, I want to lead you into your book. That's bold of you here, because I think it's such a powerful tool, especially to the new generation that has a lot of influence online. And social media can either very easily turn into a more negative influence on them. What does being bold mean to you? And how did that idea blossom into life for your book?
Yeah. I think, that quote from my conversation with Lewis is really apt there because, it's a bold thing to challenge labels. It's a bold thing to challenge our human nature in a couple of different ways. Specifically, the idea that we're very good in life at identifying lack. We're very good at identifying not enoughness. We're very good at identifying where we're falling short, where we're falling behind. And that's good, I suppose, right? That's what makes humans different, in that we could identify these things and then work to fill the gap and, be ambitious and strive for more. And it's great. But so often in the process of that, we put unfair, untrue labels upon ourselves. Namely, I'm to this, I'm not enough this, I'm so on and so forth. And those labels usually come from someone else, come from childhood, adolescence. They come from unfair self-judgment. So it's a bold thing to push back on that. It's a bold thing to push back on thinking that, for so much time in your life, you've been told that you're too intense, or too quiet, or too loud, and too ambitious, or asking for too much. Like, it's a bold thing to push back against something that you've been told is true, that maybe you have several life experiences that have shown you that it's true in your mind. It's a bold thing to push back on labels. So really, the book is about labels. It's a book about not allowing yourself to kowtow to a label that someone else told you. And it's a bold thing to push back on your own internal wiring. Like, one of the first chapters in the book is about this thing called the beautiful mess effect, which is basically how unfair we are to ourselves and kind of hypocritical we are to ourselves. We say that we love other people, friends, partners, business partners, who are weird and wild and honest and funny and quirky, right? We all say that, right? We don't want boring, vanilla people in our lives. We want the honest, the weirdos. Like, that's what makes life great. But then when we say to ourselves, well, I can't be weird, wild, and passionate, intense, and honest because other people won't appreciate that in me, it just exposes how hypocritical we are. Not hypocritical in the villain sense, just in our wiring, in the sense that we can objectively say we think this quality is universally good in other people, but not good in me, through some weird logic. So the book is basically about mindfully and logically breaking down some of that disconnect in our mind, in our heart, and the way that we perceive ourselves. And I think it's a bold thing. I think it's a bold thing in the face of so much evidence, perhaps, that we've gathered in our lives to support that unfair judgment, to push back, to reinvent ourselves, to choose kinder labels, to choose better words. It's a bold thing. And I really encourage people to at least give it a shot.
Absolutely. And you have this idea and notion about the idea of being too much, which hits home for a lot of us, especially that we can relate it to a lot of things. And why do you think society is so quick to label people? You've talked about this in the intro, and I'm really curious to expand on it, because especially on women and younger folks, where beauty and being enough plays a very big part of their lives, and can label them as being too sensitive or too loud or too ambitious. Why is it wired that way?
Yeah, I think nature, science, mathematics, we all gather around the mean, right? We all gather around the average, and humans in particular are very averse socially to being ostracized, right? So it makes sense. Right? We want to be accepted, so we all huddle around common characteristics. We don't want to shake the boat. So it's a very social survival mechanism for sure. We want to be accepted. Like, acceptance is a fine thing. Like, who wouldn't want to be accepted? No one wants to be alienated. No one wants to feel left behind. No one wants to feel lonely. So we do these things for a variety of different reasons. But at the end of the day, I mean, let's call it what it is. We do these things out of fear, not out of love. And those are two opposing forces in life, right? Fear and love. Like, living out of fear, living out of love. You know, I think it's our job to try to live out of love. That's love for ourselves. That's love for life. That's love for who we are. It's love, you know, also read the room, right? This isn't a book about just being, you know, intentionally odd, but it's a book about being honest with yourself. And, you know, I think it requires us to push back against social conditioning, our own conditioning. And, you know, the more I talk about all this stuff, the more I fundamentally believe that your honesty, I call it vulnerability, right? Vulnerability encompasses like honesty. It encompasses your passions, your quirks, your intensity. So we'll say your vulnerability. I fundamentally believe that your vulnerability in life is a filter for the wrong people and it's a magnet for the right people every single time. And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes when it seems that it's mostly a filter for the wrong people and not so much a magnet for the right people. Timing is a heck of a thing in life. Like, usually the regrets that we have come from rushing, come from forcing. If we just let things play out a little bit longer, in my experience, at least, you let that filter and that magnet work its balance, and eventually you start becoming that magnet for the right people, the right experiences, the right jobs, and everything makes sense, right? It's the whole idea of connecting the dots, looking back. Life happens for you. I think the more we can lean into that, the more we can start seeing the things that make us unique as superpowers. I'm 37 now, and I live in Miami too, where there's a lot of sameness and a lot of huddling around certain extreme averages around here. I love the people who are odd and outside of that. And I think you talk to people who are older and more emotionally mature, and they all say the same thing. So there really is a timing element to all this. If you could just force yourself in your 20s in particular to be honest with yourself, to see your vulnerability as a filter and a magnet, I think you're going to look back and be very grateful that you were patient in that regard instead of rushing into something, instead of forcing yourself into a scenario. So yeah, I would really see it as a power. It is an active mechanism. When you put your weirdest, realest, most vibrant self out there, it filters out the wrong people because they're not going to jive with it. And it's like this internal audit that very quickly exposes those people. They can't survive in your world. And that's the difference. Like, it's not, you're not trying to survive in their world. It's like they can't survive in your world because you've built this vibrant life built around your vulnerability. But then you have the magnet of the right people, and it just makes sense and it becomes very clear. But that won't be the case if you're ignoring it and if you're being unfair to yourself. So easier said than done, but trying to find a way to see those qualities as good things, as empowering things, I think it could really change your.
Absolutely. And I really like this idea about how Terry Cole describes you as an original thinker. You've had a podcast with her about, I think, 8 months ago, and she really enjoyed how your mindfulness is a movement. And you think that actually many people think mindfulness is about stillness, but actually it's more about being out there, seeking it all the time, being movement, having it flowing. So one of your biggest messages in the book is about ditching the pressure to be normal. It's all about seeking your weirdest, funnest, wildest self. And my question for you now, Case, is why do you think we're actually sacrificing when we try to fit in or follow the timeline of life?
Well, because it's not honest. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if you were to ask me what my goal is in life, like amidst like some specific things, I would say my goal is to be honest with myself. From that, only good things can happen, or at least at minimum, it minimizes your regret in life, to be honest with yourself. And that's a tough place to be sometimes, because you could be honest with yourself and you could be like, hey, well, I am not where I want to be. I'm not who I want to be. I don't have enough money. I don't have a partner. Like, it could be a very humbling place to be in, to be honest with yourself. But it removes you from those scenarios where you're subsisting in the gray and you're forcing yourself into people and places and jobs that you don't belong. And you don't get that time back. So I really do think it's about honesty. It's about how you speak to yourself, and it's about what you hear when you listen to yourself and what you do with that. I mean, mindfulness, mindfulness isn't just sitting in your feelings. Mindfulness is how you speak to yourself about those feelings and then what you do with those feelings. So a lot of my work is about encouraging people to identify feelings, how I feel. Listen to yourself, right? The act of bringing your mind and body to the same place, being non-judgmental of a feeling. Mindfulness is not about trying to control those feelings. It's listening to your feelings. But then it's speaking to yourself back about those feelings. This is where the whole idea of optimism comes from. This is where the whole idea of taking honesty and turning it into a life of abundance comes from. Like, it's not just sitting in our feelings and ruminating in our feelings. It's how do we speak back to ourselves about them? What are the words that we use to speak back to ourselves about them? Like, I lead a lot of sessions all over about, we say, for instance, like, I feel anxious, right? Just to pick the low-hanging fruit. A lot of people say they look at their life or it's a Tuesday and they're like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty anxious. Even that phrasing is problematic. And most people don't say I feel anxious. Most people say I am anxious. And obviously you can see where I'm going with that. That's problematic. Like, you're not an anxious person. Your being is not anxious. So like, let's at least use the word feel. I feel anxious. But even that's problematic because it's not you as a person do not feel anxious. There's a part of you that feels anxious, right? Your whole being is not feeling anxious. There is a cute little part of you that is stemming from an acute little part of life that is making you feel that way. So I encourage people to say, a part of me feels anxious. That's the listen to ourselves. But what about the talk to ourselves, right? So we have unearthed what we found when we reflect, when we practice honesty. A part of me feels anxious. But, and then we go back to the definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness, listening to yourself, talking to yourself. Optimism, the belief that things can change. Okay, how can we bring the belief that things can change into our internal dialogue? Well, it's a part of me feels anxious, but, and then what is the belief? What is the belief around movement? But I am handling everything on my plate just fine, but I know I'm capable of moving forward, but I'm in a season of change and this is the price that I'm paying for what I want. Like, what is that? How do we develop that? And a lot of that is word choice and it's creative writing, but that's where our truth lies, that comes from listening to ourselves, but gives us a reason to be hopeful and prevents us from doing the number one most harmful thing in our life, which is ascribing permanence to our emotions, right? If you don't have that second sentence, you become an anxious person. Mm-hmm. Anxiousness becomes your permanent state. We don't necessarily say that, but our mind believes what our internal dialogue says. So if we're constantly saying, I am anxious, I feel anxious, eventually that's where your life heads. Or I feel unlovable, I feel behind, I feel stuck, I feel whatever, misunderstood, I feel awkward, whatever it is. So we have to develop that secondary phrasing, and it comes from honesty, but then that secondary phrasing comes from movement, the belief that things can change. So that's what my whole work is about. That's a bold thing as well. To come up with a hopeful, cheesy second sentence, I think, is everything in life, and I think everyone should try their best to do it.
Absolutely, and you're 100% right. I mean, it's so easy to let yourself be defined by one feeling, especially in the moment. I'm afraid of this, and suddenly all your word revolves around how you feel in that particular moment, but it doesn't define your life in entirety. And you actually have this definition that mindfulness is two things: vocalizing yourself, vocalizing your feelings, how you are, vocalizing it to yourself, but then also visualizing it. Seeing how you will become a more, let's say, fluent or spontaneous person when you, for instance, feel these emotions that could be negative. And your book mixes a lot of this with real talk and science-backed research. Can you walk us through this idea of logical mindfulness? And what is your favorite, let's say, habit or routine that you personally do when you encounter it?
Yeah, well, I would say it's closely related to the idea of manifesting, right? So I'm not a huge spiritual, like, just visualize and manifest abundance and energy. To me, that's amazing if someone understands that. To me, I need a line of logic. So to me, it's the idea of listening to yourself, talking to yourself, visualizing. It really just comes down to the idea of,
I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Computer Generated Solutions, CGS. If you're looking to take your career to the next level, CGS is the place to be. With almost 8,000 employees worldwide, CGS is a global leader offering exciting career opportunities in technology, customer service, and business solutions. They invest in professional growth, providing continuous skill development in an international work environment. If you're ready to grow your career and explore opportunities at CGS today, find out more details at www.romania.cgsinc.com.
So to me, it's the idea of listening to yourself, talking to yourself, visualizing. It really just comes down to the idea of human nature, right? disconnect between what we tell ourselves to be true and the reality we want to live. That's where the visualization element comes in. We can't tell ourselves a story, for instance, because I do a lot of dating content. We cannot, these two things are at odds with each other. We cannot sit here and tell ourselves there's no good men out there, there's no good women out there. And then in the same breath say, I can't wait to find my soulmate. Those two things are at odds with each other, right? Think about it logically, like saying the first would remove the possibility of the second. Manifesting is bringing those stories into congruence with each other and allowing for both of them to be true, right? So the idea of visualizing would be coming up with a story on the latter half that is supported by the first half, or at least those stories can flow together. So you could say, man, I'm frustrated by the fact that I haven't found a good guy or the right woman for me, right? For instance. But I fully believe that there's someone out there who is drawn to my spark, whatever, less poetic than that. But like now we're bringing the realities together, but we cannot tell ourselves a story that I am too weird to make friends. I am not smart enough to be a best-selling author. And then in the same breath, write down, I want to be a best-selling author. I want to have a friend. Like we can't do that. That just logically doesn't make sense. So we have to be able to connect those two things. The best thing to do, of course, would be to edit that first sentence in light of what I was saying with listening and talking to ourselves and optimism. But at minimum, we at least find a way to compromise and allow for the thread of logic to connect both of them. That is the idea of visualization in the sense of mindfulness. And yeah, sometimes all it takes is just, again, thinking about the reality we want to live and then thinking about the story we tell ourselves and asking ourselves, is that story support the reality? No? Well, then no wonder we're not experiencing that reality. Let's edit that first sentence. And again, that's a bold thing because we could have been telling ourselves a story for a long time. We could have been telling ourselves a description of reality based on what our parents told us for a long time, or a friend or a former ex who really hurt us, and that became our worldview, our lens. So it's a bold thing to challenge that. But if we want that reality that we say we want, we have to fix the story we tell ourselves. And that requires visualization, right? It requires creative writing. It requires us to just edit all that.
And I'm really interested about your journey right now and the first moment that you thought to yourself that you were too much or misunderstood that comes up in your mind. What helped you push through and stay true to yourself?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I've never felt like I was too much. I'm not the world's most crazy extrovert type person. If anything, I was probably the opposite, more introverted. I would say on the career path side, like I had a whole career in a completely different industry for a long time. I very much identified by that. I worked hard in that. I did it for 12 years. And then I up and quit that to share my feelings for a living and write quotes on the internet for a living. Like that was a big thing that I think a lot of people didn't understand, and my parents included. I think what really helped me, and this is like very specific, I have really pushed myself to do, even like to do things like this, to do things live with real people. I host a lot of events now in person because online, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of overthinking because there's a huge barrier between you and reality. You write things, you publish things, you do a video, you edit it, you put it up. Like that's not real life. It certainly is important, but it's not real life. So I've really pushed myself to have live conversations where there's no script. I am tapping into what's real to me. This is a real conversation. I do these events in person. I meet real people. There's real eyeballs staring at me. I'm doing it for real. That is how you break through imposter syndrome. That is how you build confidence. And it's my first couple times doing that. I bet if you were to go back to 2019 and listen to some interviews, I probably did not say good, compelling things, but that has really helped me break free of thinking I'm too this or too that or not this enough. Like the experience of doing those things, not only the rewarding aspect of actually meeting people and them being like, wow, okay, so that was really helpful and thank you so much, but also just the act of being afraid, being nervous, doing it, realizing you're capable. I mean, that's how you build confidence, right? You build it through experience. But that has been really, really helpful for me, especially in an era where it's so easy to just sit in comfort online and be an influencer or something like that. If you really want to make an impact and you really want to prove to yourself that you have expertise, you do it in person and you put yourself in that vulnerable position. And to me, still to this day, I mean, I did 2 events last week here in Miami. I did a conversation yesterday with Gary Vaynerchuk live at a conference here in Miami called Possible. Doing those kinds of things is what will remove any question of if you're to this or to that. You do that and you're like, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. I'm exactly in the right position. So I would encourage people to do the awkward things for sure.
And you push yourself outside your comfort zone. You challenge yourself. I mean, you've also done these perfect moments collaborations with Marta and Garrix, where you talk about mindfulness and while he's remixing music. So it's really cool to see that you tried everything. And I think that really helps you as well to see what's the best path for you. What is the thing that draws you most to it? And now your most popular YouTube video is called What to Do When Someone Breadcrumbs You. I have a question now that just came up to my mind now as you were talking about how we stay true to ourselves. And you say that breadcrumbing, a person that breadcrumbs you, is someone who intentionally manipulates you for their own benefit. Can you talk to me about that and how you overcome these challenging people?
Yeah, to be honest, I recorded that video so long ago, I don't even know what I said in it. So I'll give you my current worldview on breadcrumbing. Yeah, it's funny because I get emails when like people comment, and I always see people commenting on it. So apparently I said something compelling. Yeah, I mean, breadcrumbing is one of those topics, right? Like, I use the word because people relate to it, right? It's a very triggering thing that people are like, yes, breadcrumbing. I think we need to be careful and not say, well, that's love bombing and that's breadcrumbing and there's no in between. Of course there's in between. The idea of breadcrumbing, of course, is when someone intentionally gives you little pieces of love, affection, and commitment, just enough to keep you on the thread, but they never have the full intention of giving you the full meal, right? I think the biggest thing with breadcrumbing is like you compare their crumbs with what you are offering. If you're offering crumbs and they're offering crumbs, well, you're at a standoff. You're both equally as compromised. If they're giving you crumbs and you're giving full effort, full energy, full love, full commitment, that is where the problem arises. And that is where you have every right to say, this is not good enough for me. I want the full bakery, as I've written before, and many other people have as well. That's the difference, right? You compare your effort and you compare their effort. That's all you need to do. And obviously there's nuance there, right? Especially in the beginning. Like if you're going full throttle and they're not, we're not expecting alignment. But if you're on the same page, you're both being honest with each other, and they're continuing to just give you little morsels because they don't know what they truly want, and you do know what you want, and you've communicated it, and they continue to do that. That is where you have every right, and you should, frankly, walk away or have an ultimatum type conversation. Like, the lens of balance is everything when it comes to a relationship. What are you willing to give? What are they willing to give? Why is it not the same? There's many valid conversations around why it's not the same, but what is that conversation? The same way I always say, a situationship is usually the result of a lack of communication. It's sometimes the case with breadcrumbing as well. We're interpreting things in one way. They're giving what they think you want, but it's not what you want. They're giving you an amount without trying to be overwhelming. This is all solvable with communicating, the world's most boring but best subject. So I would say breadcrumbing, look at your effort, look at theirs. If it's not aligned, have a conversation. Following the conversation, is there change? No, then it's a pretty simple equation. It's a painful equation, but it's simple in the light of balance and that honesty.
I would actually challenge you on this one here, Case, with what you said about situationships. That actually, in my opinion, to add on what you said, I feel like it's more about, in some cases, a person not being ready to stand up to what their values are. And in the same way that you said there's miscommunication, it could be miscommunication to you personally, because you as a person may be seeking something else, but you're deciding to stay in your comfortable zone and you're seeking something stable, and you perhaps think of yourself too negatively and you don't want to take that leap of faith, that risk to cut it off and look actually and seek what your value is and what you can be made for. I want to take you on here to the chapter about choosing yourself. You do a lot of relationship content online, and I like how this chapter starts with how amazing is it to realize you can be more than one thing in life. And the quote itself, you look happier since you started loving yourself in the same way you've always loved others. Can you talk to me about this chapter and why it's more important about choosing yourself?
Yeah, well, it's such an important chapter. I actually literally wrote an entire new book on that idea. I don't have it. It's over here somewhere. It's coming out later this year. It's called The Opposite of Settling, which is basically the idea that the relationship you want absolutely requires you to have full throttle, full intensity love for yourself first. Like it is the whole point of a relationship is to take the intense love that you've had for yourself and that you've used to build a life that you love, and it's to amplify that. You know, love is very important, of course, but we have put so much emphasis on it that a lot of us have basically created a waiting room of our lives where we're waiting for that person to come along so that we could build a life together. And, you know, talk about word choice. I think build a life together is the wrong word choice. I think the better word choice is to do life together. You build the life that you want on your own. You have so much love for yourself that you draw in the right passions, the right jobs, the right friends, and ultimately the right partner. But you build that life, and then someone comes along and you do life together. You don't wait for a partner to come along to finally build the life of your dreams. They amplify all of the work, the happiness, the joy that you've put into your life. That's why, I'm very much at odds with the phrasing settle down, right? We use that so often. Like, when are you going to settle down? Or I'm ready to settle down. I think it's just the worst energy phrase in the world. And certainly, literally, the phrase is accurate, right? You're settling down. You're not dating. You don't have a roster. You're not on Hinge, whatever. Great. But the idea of settle down, my whole thing is you settle up, right? You have a partner now who helps you get more out of life because you've created a life. They've created a life. You come together and you just do more. That's the energy that we should have in the context of a relationship, not less, not throttle back, right? And certainly not waiting for someone to come along to give you the catalyst to live your best life. So yeah, the idea of loving yourself is a cliche and a half, and it's the entire wellness world is built around it. But in light of a relationship, it is essential. I mean, if you don't have love for yourself, begs the question of why would someone have love for you? And not in a antagonistic, triggering sense, but if you don't know how to love yourself, how are you going to know someone who loves you? How are you going to guide them to love you, right? I mean, a lot of the book that I just wrote is about tough conversations. No one truly knows how to love you. They can take a good stab at it. The right person's going to be pretty close because you have that alignment, but no one knows how to love you and make you feel loved. That is your job to tell them. And if you don't love yourself, how are you going to know the words or the context or the emotions that make you feel loved in the context of a relationship? So without that, everything else is going to be really difficult. So I don't know. I find that to be really uplifting. Cool. I get to lock in here and figure out what makes me feel loved. I get to lock in here and figure out what makes me feel connected with the world. Like, the purpose of being alive is to find what makes you feel alive. And then the purpose of a relationship is to come along and amplify that. But if you skip step one, step two is going to be very confusing. And that's how, to our earlier conversation, you find yourself forcing and rushing. So the antidote to that is patience, and it's presence, and it's self-love, for lack of a better phrase.
And I also agree that I think it's not two halves make a whole. It's you have your whole, your life figured out. And then if a great person comes in and adds value to your own life, then great, you've got that. But it just comes on as a bonus with your life from what you've said. And you've mentioned your new book coming up later this year, The Opposite of Settling. And you've just posted about this a day ago, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna become a phenomenal overnight hit. Would you be up for a challenge in the terms of speaking for 1 minute as to why you could persuade the listener to pre-order your new book? Why do you think it's so important to go ahead and choose yourself forward?
Of course I can. The challenge is, can I do it in just a minute? Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm very bought into the book because it's optimism. We are just beat over the head with negativity nowadays, and our own negativity. Like, we've had a couple bad dating experiences and the future has become gloom and doom. So we need a reset. And it's not just a reset in terms of how to find a partner and maybe some new rules to think about. It is a full-blown spiritual alignment reset around the purpose of love. The whole book is about the idea of build a life you love and love will meet you there. Not the other way around. not the find love and then build a life you love. Build a life you love and love will find you there. It's like to what you said. It's a great analogy, the two halves and the whole. It's like the food related analogy, because I think I wrote the book when I was hungry. I've got a lot of food related analogies. Is like finding the right partner is finding an extra fry at the bottom of the bag. It's wonderful. It's amazing, but you're already full. You already had a great meal. You're good. And this isn't like a book about forgetting about love. It is reminding us of the incredible power and gift that is love, one of the main purposes of life. But it's within the context of amplifying. That is amplifying the life that you love, that you've built. And I think we're all so fully capable of that to maybe take a step back and just be present within our lives and build a life we love so that we can attract the love that we deserve. I think a lot of people want to hear this, but need some guidance of what that looks like. And I think a lot of people need to hear this. They are so in the depths of the frustration of dating that this is a welcome message. And I wrote it, and it's coming out in a couple months, but you can pre-order it now. And yeah, thanks for that.
There we have it.
That was more
Amazing.
than a minute, but whatever.
I absolutely also challenge the listener to go ahead and get it, because I think that wellness in itself is such a big place. There's so much also controversial topics and things out there on the internet so far that it's hard to know where to start. So your book, The Opposite of Settling, is a great place to begin that. Now, Case, I'd like to give you two questions that are traditions here of the SMARTA family. The first one being that I love to read. I have a bookshelf behind me. What would you say are the two books that completely transformed how you view life or your perspective?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I would be remiss not to mention my friend. So like Diego Perez Young Pueblo, like I love his writing. He's written many books. His latest book, How to Love Better, I think was really, really powerful. He has such a way with words in the way that I aspire to write as well. I really like his newest book, How to Love Better, because it's a very, very mindful take on the meaning of love and the meaning of connection, the shared vulnerability, which is such an important topic that I write about, but he does such a better job. So I would say that. And then, I don't know, in lieu of saying a specific book, I mean, I reference a lot of the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist writer, thinker, peace activist. I use a lot of his thinking in my sessions because a lot of his thinking is around a contrast, right? He talks a lot about past pain and present wisdom, and the connection there so that in the present, we can prescribe it to the future. So I would say blanket statement around Thich Nhat Hanh's writing. It'll give you some depth that perhaps you lack with more contemporary authors.
No, you're full on out there. And I love those two because they're very different to the ones that we've already had. And now the second question is this tradition that we have here on the SMARTA podcast, which is I asked my last guest, Micah Star Liberty in this case, to leave a question for the next one. So she left over this question for you, Case, to answer. As someone who emphasizes mindfulness and self-awareness, how do you believe individuals can cultivate a trauma-informed mindset in their daily lives, especially when supporting friends or colleagues who have experienced trauma?
Ooh, what a doozy of a question. Well, I mean, trauma is one of those subjects where, you know, I would give my opinion, but then I would encourage people to speak to a therapist. I mean, I think the thing that I've learned when it comes to the other people, friends, family, people that you're close with, people that you want to help, people that you want to help free them of trauma and help them heal, the best thing you could do is to listen. And I know that's not the most exciting answer, but like even in like my relationship with my girlfriend, I'm so primed to jump to how can I help you? Here's how I want to help you. Let's solve this thing together, right? Where the reality is, sometimes the most helpful, if not 90% of the time, the most helpful thing you could do is just provide a space for them to speak and for you to listen and for you to be there physically and emotionally. And it makes sense too, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about here is working through how we speak to ourselves about the pain. And sometimes that's what someone who has that trauma in their life, that's what they need to work through. They need to work through how they speak about it. And to speak about it, you need someone to listen. And sometimes it's your job just to listen. And sometimes that, especially as a man who's wired for problem solving and I want to run through a wall, it requires some control and some restraint. But I think overwhelmingly so, that's probably the best thing we could do for our friends and the people we're close to is provide a space where they know that they could be honest and safe. And you just listen. And then you could say, hey, do you want to vent or do you want to problem solve? You could ask them that directly. Providing that kind of that option and that space, I think, is everything.
You're right, absolutely. And in case I started the podcast with you talking directly with the listener, I want to end it in the same way. So if you want to leave the listener with any parting advice or a habit or an idea for young listeners that are just starting out their careers, what would you leave them with?
I would say that what I say a lot, which is that, hey, listener, there's no right way to live your life, but there's a wrong way. And the wrong way is to think that there's a right way. Basically a fancy way of saying that just because someone else has found happiness or a version of success in their career or the right partner, be inspired by them, but you don't have to emulate and you don't have to feel behind if you don't have their exact definition of success, love, happiness, fulfillment. I think I wasted a lot of time in my 20s chasing other people's definitions of things. It's great to be inspired by other people. It's fantastic, but we live in such an incredible time where we are so fully capable of creating the exact right version for ourselves and figuring out what that means to us. That's why I'm so big on the idea of create a life you love. Not that looks good on paper, not that other people will love too, but that you truly love, as opposed to chasing our tail around expectations, timing, other people's definitions. So there's no right way, but there's a wrong way. The wrong way is to think that there's a right way. Figure out your right way, define your right way. And I think you're going to be so much happier. You're not going to rush. You're not going to box yourself in. You're going to look back and you're going to say, man, I'm glad I figured out what was right for me. I'm glad that I filtered out the wrong people and I magnetized the right people. And I think it's going to really serve you well. And you're going to look back and you're going to be grateful you did.
Absolutely. I love that ending. Case Kenny, thank you so much for being on the SMARTA podcast. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you about optimism and mindfulness. And I cannot wait for your biggest success with later on throughout this year with your next book.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Wow. I felt completely, repeatedly amazed by Case's wisdom. And I just wanted to ask you a quick favor. If you felt like you learned anything new today whatsoever, please could you go ahead and share this video with a loved one or a friend, because it's what keeps getting us amazing guests on the podcast that share valuable information as to how you can go ahead and really attain your potential. And finally, I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And I just wanted to be the first person that tells you today, if nobody else has, that I believe in your ability to create the life of your dreams and finally reach your true potential. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm Sonia Marta, and you've listened to the SMARTA Podcast. All right, see you next week. Bye-bye.